and or I'm sorry, not O'Neill Flow. It must have been Terrell Pond. O'Neill Flow is a little bit off the map. Yeah. So Terrell Pond has this like really gorgeous view of like these little like mountains behind it. And the water was very calm. So there was like this perfect mirrored reflection on there. And I walked around to go see the O'Neill Flow lean-to, and I checked that out. I didn't stop there really for anything. I just wanted to look at it real quick. So I ended up getting back on trail and I checked out Terrell Pond. This area is kind of tricky, so I would just definitely be mindful of Terrell Pond because the trail, in my opinion, like there's multiple little footpaths in this area, and like in this section of trail between O'Neill Flow and Terrell is kind of like a faint footpath, and there was like it seemed to be like five footpaths in this area, so I started having kind of some trouble like figuring out exactly where I was, but it was because the marker that I was looking for was just like slightly down this hill and like to the left or something like that I just like couldn't see in like line of sight. So it just took me walking down one of them real quick just to look, and I sure enough found one, and I just followed it along. And when I kept going, I started hearing some people up ahead of me, and I was like, okay, like I'm not sure like anything about that, so I just kept going, and eventually I ran into them. So you're gonna start to go up this little section. You're gonna notice on the map it says scenic viewpoint, and you're starting to climb up at this point, and it felt like high peaks climbing. It was like kind of like straight up on all fours kind of a thing. So I'm like hiking up, and I eventually run into these kids that are like in these like black and gray like kind of uniform, like nylon looking type of, I don't know, get-ups that they had. And they were kind of just like going along. They had huge packs. Like it felt like their setups were out of maybe like the early 90s. I was like, what is going on here? I was like, whatever it is they're packing for probably days. I was really interested in talking to them. So I was talking to them, and they said that they were on a NOLS, like a final test. And NOLS is like the National Outdoor Leadership Program, and they were from New York City. So they were learning how to be like outdoorsy kids and like getting out there and doing a section of the Northville-Placid Trail. And I can't remember. I think they were dropped off somewhere. I can't remember, like near Blue Mountain Lake, and they got on trail, and they were to end at Lake Durant. So they had kind of like a big day, and this was like their last push. So I thought that was pretty cool. And one of them was asking me like, "Are you doing the whole thing? Are you going to Lake Placid?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "That's so cool." And a couple of the other ones were like, "I don't want to ever do this again." So that was kind of cool, like a nice interaction. And like we stopped and filled up water, and like I soaked my feet for a little while, and they're just like hanging out and talking, and then we got moving. So that was kind of like a nice little interaction. But so there was this like scenic viewpoint, and I'll let you guys figure that out for yourselves when you get out there and see what you think of it. Um, so I go down, and like you kind of like go down a little bit, like a nice like descent, which is kind of steep. But as you go, you kind of do kind of get some sights of like the high peaks just north of everything. So that was kind of nice to see some familiar faces in a way.
Absolutely, and this is in the Blue Mountain Wild Forest.
Yep.
This
Yep.
scenic
Exactly.
viewpoint. Excuse me.
Yep. Right. So there's like the designated scenic viewpoint, and then as I was coming down the mountain, I started to like get some views. Um, so I was continuing to go, seeing some more footbridges and stuff like that. And in this section, you might be able to see like Mount Sabatis there. It says footbridge. And this section was all like these really pretty like moss and like grasslands kind of, but like they were surrounded by spruce trees, and there was these like railroad ties that you'd walk around. So something to keep in mind also is don't slip on them. Don't go running onto these. Like step on them carefully, because I did definitely slip a couple of times on them, like just like walking fast, getting on top of them quick. Like they're super slick, like they're mossing over and they're rotting. So just be careful of that.
Good to know.
Yep. So eventually finally started hearing Route 28 North, and I was getting into Long Lake, and there's a parking area there. And as soon as I got out to the Route 28 North, I flicked on my phone out of airplane mode, and I was just trying to like call home and see what was going on in the world. And there's this lady that parked in the parking lot right there next to me. She's like, "Hey." I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" She's like, "Where are you headed?" I'm like, "To Lake Placid, honestly." And she's like, "Well, are you going into the like onto Long Lake, like over by the lean-tos?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And she's like, "Do you want to ride up Tarbell? Because like that's where I'm going." I'm like, "No, I'm gonna walk." And like she was just so funny. I can't remember her name, but I ended up meeting her online, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." She was just very like extroverted and kind of like talkative, and it was really cool. Kind of like a wake up call because I just like came out of the woods. I was like, "Whoa!" This lady's just
Sure.
like yelling at me, like, "Yo!" So that was cool.
Probably was wonderful having, you being by yourself for so long and in your own head. It's probably so nice to see somebody so excited to see you, that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
she was like, I think she was like trying to figure out where to go, and she's like, "Do you just go off this road?" I was like, "I don't know, I've never been here before." So I just like whipped up the map. I was like, "Yeah, it looks like the trail goes up Tarbell Road." So we started going up there. She drove her way up and she parked at the top there. And the trail register signed in. And I started to walk. And as you're walking into the trail, you start to see Long Lake. And you kind of keep it in sight for a majority of your walk. You might lose it for like, I think maybe a quarter mile, and then you come back. You're just kind of like walking the outer like cove of Long Lake, and there's some lean-tos in the very beginning, and I saw a couple of people there. I started seeing some boats. I was like, this is cool. Like, I'm like starting to see some civilization. Like, I can't believe I'm this far. I'm like making this.
And at this point, you're now entering the High Peaks Wilderness, which is the last area of the entire hike. So,
Yeah.
you're getting to that finish line, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it's so crazy because it really doesn't feel like you're that far into you're actually in like Placid. I ended up seeing the lady that I saw. I ended up passing her on the trail, and I was like, "I'll see you there, I guess." And she's like, "Yeah." Like she said that she was gonna go to Kelly Point, and that was where I was gonna go. So I was like, "Well," I was like, I'll see you there," kind of a thing. So I get up there, and I get to Kelly Point Lean-To, the first one, and the first thing I do is I drop my pack and I go to the water. So this lean-to on Long Lake is you can paddle up to it. So there's kind of like a little like cobblestone rocky, I guess it's cobblestone, little cove that you can walk down into. So got some water and I brought it back up, and I was getting settled. And as I got there, I realized there were some people at the other lean-to, which is just up the way for me, a couple of feet, maybe 50, 60 feet up. And it looked like it was kind of like a gentleman's night out kind of a thing. It was like a grandfather and his son and his grandson, and they took their canoe in and they kind of plopped it there, and they were just kind of like cooking and talking about backcountry things like how to start a fire, how to boil water, how to cook in the backcountry. So it was kind of like nice to listen to, and like the grandson was like totally intent on listening. And they eventually came over and introduced themselves and asked about my plans, like, am I going to Lake Placid? And I said yes. So that was a nice little interaction. And then the woman that I met, she showed up, and I felt bad. She was felt kind of like defeated that she didn't like get a lean-to, and I was like, you can totally stay here with me. Like there's plenty of room. Like there's no reason why I wouldn't share it with you. And she was like, "Oh no, it's fine. I actually have a hammock, and I wanted to." Um, she wanted to use the campsite that was right behind the lean-tos, and which was really pretty. Had its nice own little fireplace and stuff like that. So everybody got settled in, everybody had their own spot, and it was nice. And everybody also had privacy. There was plenty of privacy there, and I kind of like watched some of these like drunk boaters. It seemed like they were drunk. Definitely not a good idea. Don't recommend drinking and boating, even though that's probably fun. These guys were just so loud out in Long Lake on this pontoon boat, so I was kind of just like laughing to myself as I watched them from my lean-to.
Oh yeah, the locals were clearly out having a good
Oh
time at
yeah,
that point.
yeah. There's
And there's a
definitely.
ton of lean-tos all along Long Lake during this stretch. Lots of different lean-tos, so lots of places to stay in case you're
Yep,
not looking at a map.
absolutely. It's a great section. There's definitely so many places, and then even if it wasn't like an actual campsite, like if you needed to plop off a trail, like the trail along this area is like flat and kind of grassy too, which is nice. So definitely a comfortable place to sleep.
So you completed day 6. You made it. You made it to Kelly Point Lean-To. what are you thinking at this point? Actually, no, not what are you thinking. What are you feeling at this point as far as all of the food that you've had in your pack? Are you kind of cruising now because it's all you've been eating and it's all you know anymore about the world? Or are you just so tired and over the food that you've been eating?
That was fine. I honestly like I love ramen noodles, so I was totally okay with it. And what I was making was what people like to call, or through hikers like to call, a ramen bomb, which is a thing of ramen noodles that you make with the water, and then you put with the water, you put mashed potatoes, like dehydrated mashed potatoes in there. So it's kind of like a soupy, like thick mixture, which probably sounds disgusting on your guys' ends, but when you're out there, it's a good filling meal, and I would recommend it. Try it at home. It's actually pretty good.
Good to know.
Um, yeah, so I did that, and I was fine. Like, yeah, of course, I could totally go for a burger, but I also had like dehydrated meals that I had with me. Like, I brought like these good to go meals. I had like risotto and like wild mushroom too that I had.
Okay,
I think,
cool, cool.
yeah, and Spruce Lake Lean to number 3, I had that, and that was really good. A lot of their stuff is like minimally processed and kind of like generally healthy, and a lot of calories too. So I definitely recommend checking them out.
So how
So
did
I
you
had,
sleep at Kelly Point Lean-To? Everyone had their privacy. You had a nice time before you went to bed. Everything goes
right.
smoothly that evening.
So I had another thunderstorm actually roll through that evening, and it definitely rocked us. And I was definitely worried about the lady that was in her hammock behind us, and I was definitely waiting for her to come into my lean-to because it was, I mean, it shook us, and
Hmm.
I was definitely worried about it, and I got word from home on the Garmin that thunderstorms were moving in my direction. So I just kind of like took precaution. I made sure I was really far back against the lean-to. The lean-to did face Long Lake, so of course you're going to get that weather blowing in. So I just tried to like get myself as far back as possible, and I definitely hugged my sleeping bag a little tighter that night. You know, it wasn't really too bad. It was the lightning, I think, was probably like the scariest part, but it was kind of just like nice knowing that like while all this weather was going on, I'm sure the other like animals and stuff are kind of like taking shelter as well.
So you survived the night, though. So overall, a better experience looking back on it now than it was at the time.
Yeah,
But everything went well. So day 7, your last full day on the trail.
yeah.
What was the goal?
The goal was Duck Hole, and so I was having all kinds of feelings like at this first lean to Kelly Point, because I was like, I'm really not that far away from Lake Placid. Like, I could possibly just grind through and just go straight to Lake Placid. So I was kind of like toying with that idea, but I just kind of like kept a decent pace, and kept going. And I really only got that feeling when I saw a trail sign, and that was just, I want to say, just after Rodney Point lean-tos, and it just said Lake Placid 28.8 miles, and I was like, whoa, like I could theoretically just grind all the way home, and I would probably be crawling out of the trail at that point, but I kind of just went with it because I figured it would be better to walk out strong in 8 than to crawl out in 7. And
Especially when you gave yourself 10 days to do it as well.
yeah, yeah, right. So I just like took my time, and this section of trail was really pretty. I kind of went into like varying like grassy like marshlands. I saw a lot of deer. I saw a couple of huge like bucks. I don't really know exactly their size. I know that they had a few points and stuff. And they were kind of just like unbothered by me. They kind of just like looked up while they were chewing their grass, and I got a couple of cool pictures of them, and I just kind of kept walking, and that was really a neat experience. Um, yeah, I got to Shattuck's Clearing, which was another kind of like a grassland area, and I guess there's some like campsites there, but I don't really recall like actually seeing like notable camping areas in that spot. And this was when you started to like see the Cold River lean-tos, and it started to get a little bit more rocky, and like 'cause you're kind of getting into the high peaks and
Hmm.
whatever remnants of those mountains as they've kind of grown over the years.
And you're that area too, the Cold River Lean-To area. There's a lot of different trail junctions at that point.
Yeah,
I mean, it
yeah,
meets up with the Calkins Brook Trail, and you're in the high peaks now. So
yep,
if you're familiar with
yeah,
hiking the high peaks, some of these, you're basically at the Seward Range at this point.
yep, yeah. And everything was very like, don't be like, it definitely was kind of intimidating to look on the map.